Welcome to Waypoints, the podcast of fly fishing travel. With helpful travel tips, news and events, destination profiles, great stories, and expert advice from seasoned and experienced traveling anglers, this is your backstage pass to the world of fishing travel. Waypoints is fueled by adventure and brought to you by Yellow Dog Fly Fishing, a hands-on specialty travel and booking company that delivers the industry's very best insider knowledge, logistical support, and trip preparation. Freshwater or saltwater, international or domestic, Yellow Dog has you covered. And now your host, Yellow Dog founder and director, Jim Klug.
Joining me today is Marcelo Pérez, the founder and CEO of Untamed Angling. For close to 20 years, Untamed has been at the forefront of jungle angling and some of the most exotic and adventurous offerings in the world of fly fishing. And their Bolivian operations have become the gold standard for golden Dorado. Marcelo, thanks for sitting down and joining us today.
Thank you, Jim.
It's great we could take some time and talk about Bolivia. We appreciate that. So, Marcelo, let me start off. You meet someone for the first time, all right? They ask you about your profession and what your company does. How do you answer that?
In a few words, it's difficult. I'm an architect. I had my office in Argentina for many years, but I always was an angler, and I was always passionate by the jungle. So I began to write in 1995, something like this, for some magazines, and I began to explore more and more the jungle. Those days in Argentina, the Dorado fishing was really tough. Finding a big Dorado was really tough. So I began to think about a way to get fly fishing destinations in the places where we can find this fishing, like national parks or indigenous territories.
Nice. So you started out, you're an architect, all right? You had a totally different life at that point in time. Now you're this, kind of wild, crazy jungle angler operating all over South America. But that wasn't always the case. You lived in Buenos Aires, you're an architect. What was your background? I mean, how did you start fishing? How did you find your way to fly fishing?
Well, my father teach me about fishing when I was a kid, and he used to bring me to the Paraná River. Those days it was quite a jungle for me, and I was a kid. So for me it was the best adventure in possible. So, but I began to fish on the fly when I was an adult.
Gotcha.
And my first fish was a Dorado.
So that was it. You were hooked from the beginning.
Yeah. And
So,
I never grab another kind of rod.
We're going to talk about this in just a second, get more into the fish and the species itself. But for those who aren't aware of what Dorado are, we're talking about the golden Dorado, which is a jungle fish. It's not the mahi-mahi Dorado,
exactly.
Which is found in saltwater. It's a freshwater fish. But here's my question. Golden Dorado, I mean, that's kind of redundant, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
It's like... calling it a bony bonefish or something like that.
It's redundant, absolutely.
So Dorado.
It's Dorado.
It's Dorado.
Yeah. Well, you can say freshwater Dorado to clear it up.
There you go.
But for us, it's a Dorado.
So in 2001, you started a new company that at the time was going to be focused 100% on golden Dorado. And so about 20 years ago, for those who don't know, and are listening and have never fished for golden Dorado or even seen a Dorado, describe the fish. What makes it so special?
Well, Dorado is I think it has the whole package. It's a beautiful, beautiful fish, but at the same time, it's very strong and fierce. And the take is amazing, and the fight is amazing, and it jumps like a tarpon. So, what can I say? It's very difficult to find a fish in fresh water that can beat the Dorado. I definitely think, and most of our clients says the same thing, that Dorado nowadays is probably one of the top 5 or top 3 fish in fresh water.
So you're operating early 2000s. You start La Zona, which is an operation in northern Argentina where you had big, huge trophy Dorado.
Huge. Yes, it was a tailwater of a dam, Salto Grande Dam, it was a completely forbidden area, like the national parks or indigenous territories. So I developed that model of conservation, working with the local people, joining the profits with the local people. The same thing that we did afterwards in Tsimane was in La Zona, but the difference is that there were no Indians there, but locals. We worked we trained local guides. We made a biological research of the fish we release. It was super strict rules we made, and the authorities took. And that was very interesting. As I told you, those days was very difficult to find a big Dorado in Argentina or in the Paraná system because of the commercial fishing and the predation and all that stuff. And in this place, I mean, every angler in a normal day could catch 20 Dorados of, 20 pounds to 40 pounds, So it was a great beginning to show what a big Dorado can do. Those days, the fly anglers in Argentina were used to catch just small fish. That's the truth. And the idea of the American anglers those days was that the Dorado was a funny fish, as a jumping small fish, very beautiful. And it was not true, They never caught an adult.
A proper Dorado.
Yeah.
That's right. So you ran La Zona in northern Argentina for a number of years, and while you were running the lodge, you had some anglers that had done some Dorado fishing in Bolivia. You began to hear stories about huge fish in the jungle setting in the wilds of Bolivia.
I saw pictures and stories, and there were a couple of small agents that were there in the Secure River and told me the stories, and it was an Australian guy that owns a magazine in Australia and made a coffee table book, and one of the chapters of the book was there in La Sunta. Okay. And we had that book in La Zona. So I was surprised about that place.
So you go from Argentina and you decide to head to Bolivia. Tell us a little bit about Bolivia. What kind of country is it?
Bolivia is a country in the center of South America that has basically two big areas: the mountain part in the west, and the jungle part in the east. And we are located. Tsimane is located exactly in the middle, in the foothills of the Andes Mountains and the end of the Amazon forest. So where we fish is basically the headwaters of an Amazon tributary.
And there's a lot of kind of preconceptions about Bolivia as a country with coca production and things like that. But safe country?
It's a safe country. I live there. There's no problem.
You've been living in Bolivia now for years. People are friendly.
The last 5 years, and I was traveling all the time before, and it's much safer than Argentina. Unfortunately for Argentina, I love my country, but it's not as safe as Bolivia, of course.
So not a lot of information that existed at that time about the jungle rivers of Bolivia. As you said, you had read a chapter, you had seen some photos. How did you go about exploring these fisheries and evaluating their potential for an actual fishing operation? I mean, you had to start somewhere, and yes, people had been doing it. There were anglers on the Secure, as you said, there were some agents, but really you're talking about going into a jungle wilderness where there's really nothing developed at this point.
Yeah, it was nothing. It was a group of friends that went there exploring with their backpacks, and they called me to go. And I was there the first time in October 2006. October 10 of 2006, I landed there in Asunta with one of these guys, and I began to see the place and explore the place and begin the work with the Indians, the Indian authorities, and the government.
And, I mean, there weren't a lot of websites that had information about this area. I mean,
it was a website, actually. These guys, the guys that were operating there, they had a website. Their company was named Bolivian Adventures. And they had some hunting destinations. They still have some hunting destinations in Bolivia for doves, nearby Santa Cruz. And they had this camp nearby Asunta village, but they fish in conventional, and they closed it in 1999, something like this. And it was abandoned, and nobody came back until we went there in 2006.
So you had seen some photos, you had read some information, you knew the big fish were there.
Oh, yeah. It was terrible photos, but, it was, for example, a wire with 40 pacus hanging, or dorados with treble hooks everywhere, and or the moturos, the big catfish, with a stick through their gills and stuff like that. That was the pictures we saw in the website. But anyway, the big fish were there, and the river was gorgeous.
And a lot of people, when they hear about the Amazon, they immediately think Brazil. Okay, but the Bolivian Amazon, we hear about how the entire Amazon itself is basically kind of one big bowl that is the size of the entire United States. So if you're looking at that big bowl, describe where Tsimane and your area of operations lies within that big Amazon picture.
Well, we are, as you said, the Amazon is mostly in Brazil. 60% of the Amazon is in Brazil, in the Amazon forest. But the headwaters are in Bolivia, Peru, the headwaters of the rivers. And we are located exactly in a chain of mountains where the Secure River, which is a tributary of the Amazon, begins. So the difference, or the particular situation of this environment, is that it's a transition area. So there are many endemic species there that live just in this transition area between the mountains and the jungle. And the rivers, as is an area with mountain rivers, the rivers get very, very clear in the winter, like a trout river,
So describe the waters over there. Tell me about the rivers, what they look like. You said they're clear most of the time.
They look like, yes. If it rains very hard in the mountains, they get muddy for a couple of days and then get clearer again. But they are clear as a trout stream in the States or in Patagonia. They're like this. And the dorados go up every year for spawning. So you have big dorados coming up in these shallow, small, clear rivers, and you fish like if you are fishing for trouts, but for dorados of about 20 pounds, 30 pounds, or something like this, with floating lines, lots of side casting. It's a very particular environment. That's very different than the Paraná system, completely different.
And you just described, the kind of like a Western trout river, and I couldn't agree more. I mean, I've been fortunate enough to come down a number of times, and a lot of times I feel like I'm standing on the Gallatin. I mean, that's what the waters look like. It's clear. Bouldery type trout river characteristics, yet you're in the middle of this incredibly dense jungle, and you're fishing for these, as you said, 20 to 30 pound, speed demon fish that are sitting in this water. And it's
trouts.
It's an
pointing the current in a pocket or...
And you do a lot of the same things you do for trout, reading the water, looking for the obvious lies of where the fish would be, seams, tail outs, things like that.
Exactly.
It's a pretty incredible system. But getting back, you talked about how they're there for spawning. I mean, why are they in this system? How did they get into this system? What is it they love about that area?
Well, there's a theory we're working on. We began to study with a group of biologists in Brazil that are specialists in characids. The Dorado is a characid like the tigerfish. Actually, they are relatives with the tigerfish. And the theory is that the Dorados were originally in the Paraná system because they are from the Paraná system. And then they passed from the Paraná basin to the Amazon basin through a river called Parapetí, which is in the border of Bolivia and Paraguay. And it happened in the last glacial era, 10,000 years ago. So the scientists know that this river changed its drainage from the Paraná system to the Mamoré River, which is a tributary of the Madeira and the Amazon. And then the theory is that those days, this population of Dorado colonized a much bigger area because the temperature was much lower, and the Amazon was a savanna, was not a forest. So with these conditions, Dorado could expand in a really big area. And then when the temperature rose, the Dorados get stuck in the headwaters of a chain of mountains, which begins in the Amoró National Parks and finishes in the Madidi National Park, all inside Bolivia. And this is, incredibly, this is the only place on the world where you can find Dorados in the Amazon basin, in this chain of mountains of Bolivia. So we have the idea, and we are beginning to study the DNA with another scientist of World Conservation Society, that is very probable that these fish are a different species.
Than what's found in the Paraná and other places.
Yes.
So we made the analogy to trout a moment ago about where they live in the river and how they behave, but the Dorado are a migratory fish. So sometimes trout will live in the same section of a river for their entire life. The Dorado are not that way.
The very adults, there are a group of a small percent of Dorados that live in the headwater and stay there.
So they're residents and they don't go anywhere.
Yes. You can see which is a resident and which not. The scales are bigger, the back is black, the head and the fins and the tail are much bigger. And what they do instead of migrate is that they go to the small creeks when the floods come and stay there in the small creeks and come back to the river again.
Let me ask you about the sabalo, because this was my next question. The sabalo event, the situation that happens in these jungle rivers, the sabalo, and tell us a little bit about the fish, but it's not, people hear sabalo, and if they fished in the Caribbean or in the Yucatan, they think tarpon, all right?
Yeah.
Not a tarpon, obviously.
No.
It's a jungle fish, and the sabalo situation...
More similar to a mullet.
It looks like a mullet.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an incredible phenomenon that happens there when these fish move in by the billions.
Oh, yeah. They come up by billions for spawning too. They spawn together with the Dorado. The sabalos are 60% of the biomass in these rivers. So everyone feeds on sabalo, including the natives. They have a super specialized technique for hunting them with bows and arrows. And the sabalo is the principal protein of these tribes. And also the fish, Dorado, and big catfish, and also the jaguar kills the sabalo, lots of birds. Everything depends on the sabalo.
And it's about a 14-inch fish. It kind of looks like a cross between a mullet and a chub.
Yeah,
and
it's bigger than a mullet, but it looks like.
And the Dorado just hammer these things.
Yeah. They can crush a sabalo of 4 pounds, 5 pounds in just one bite. The design of the Dorado mouth is specific to catch big bait.
And when they tear into these schools of the sabalo, it's just as violent as anything you've ever seen in the jungle.
Oh yeah, it's a feeding frenzy, completely unique. They chase the sabalo in the shallows and they begin to push them to the shores, to shallower areas, and they hunt in groups like lions. And then one of them attack, and the other ones boom, 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 and sabalos fly away everywhere. And well, it's a great moment. If you are close to that, you can cast whatever you have in your rod, and they will take it.
It's terrifying. It's like you're standing there, and when this happens, it's like someone starts throwing bowling balls into the river. I mean, things are exploding everywhere. There's hundreds of sabalo flying all over the place, and these big golden, terrifying, vicious creatures are just absolutely smashing these sabalo.
Yes, and then they go in really shallow, so you can see the back of the fish out of the water, hunting for the sabalo.
It's a pretty incredible sight. Definitely one of the coolest things in the world of fly fishing.
Oh, yeah. And the interesting thing there is that the behavior of the fish has a range so wide. You can see the fish hunting like this, crazily hunting, or standing in a pool like a brown trout, a big Dorado, and then you approach the fish and make a small noise with a branch, and it's gone. Or if it sees your line, it's gone. It's the same fish that you will see in a feeding frenzy, and they will take everything. So in between those points, you have lots of different forms of catching the fish, or situations that you need to know to catch the fish.
Well, so let's talk about setting up the lodges down there. It's 2009, and you officially start the Tsimane operations in Bolivia. You have 2 lodge locations at that point. And this is a new business in that it's a partnership with the indigenous people that own the land in the entire area.
Yeah.
How did this come to be?
Well, the original idea was to combine a lot of different stuff to get the permits there. The first thing I thought was, imagine that if you want to make a business with an estancia owner, and that he has a river, there's a very good fishing, and you have the idea of doing a lodge there, what will you do? You will do a partnership with the owner, probably, or rent the land. Or so that what I thought is these guys are the owners. The only way to do it is doing a fair, equitative partnership with them, and that's what we did.
And so were the Tsimane, were they immediately open to the idea when you approached them?
Yes. I honestly, I think they were not understanding exactly what will happen because they never seen a fly fishing operation before. They understood very fast that the fish released survive. That was a concern for them. And they understood also very fast that their skills as hunters were super useful for the project. So they began to get proud immediately about the project and their activity in the project. And of course, they were winning a lot of money, so they were really happy.
So the way you have it set up is they share the profits of the fishing operation.
Yeah.
And the operation now provides employment for a lot of them.
Yes.
So
employment just in the areas that are related to their culture. We don't. I personally don't agree with the classical model of many NGOs that train the natives to administrate the tourism operation. I think in the Amazon, at least, it breaks the soul of the village, of the community. It's completely another culture.
Foreign concept.
From ours.
Right.
It's another concept. So it's not good. I think also the money they get, we made like a deal that they of course it's their money. They can use it how they want. But we made a deal with them. They have to use 80% of this profit for common projects, for projects that are
for the community.
For the community that are getting better way of life for them. For example, last year we helped them to do. We helped them because we design all the stuff and make the budgets and all that stuff. But they did 6 filtration houses, so now they have potable water in all the villages, which is very important in the rainy season because the water gets muddy and they don't have another water to drink or to cook or to clean their babies or whatever, and it gets a lot of diseases. So it's a system of filter we found in Santa Cruz that doesn't use energy, so they have always it's like a simple system, but it's a little bit expensive, and they built 6 in the 5 communities that form the Indian Association.
So 10 years you guys have been in operation down there at this point. Anglers coming in from different parts of the world, a lot from the States, probably 80% of your
80%
anglers are from the U.S. Has it been good for the Tsimane? Has the project worked out well for them?
Yes.
And they're happy?
Oh, yeah. We sometimes we don't have great fishing because of some natural reasons, but 90% of the anglers are super happy with the experience. And it's not just about fishing. Fishing is crazy, but the whole experience to be there with the Indians and have a very comfortable facility in the middle of nowhere, this contrast of the wilderness, the total wilderness you feel when you are walking and waiting there and you see jaguar footprints and whatever, and all these birds and butterflies, and at the same time you come back to the lodge and you have Wi-Fi, you have super good food and drinks and wine, and I don't know. It's a good contrast for most of the guests.
And it must have been a monumental project logistically, getting all this set up. There were no roads. There's no way to move around other than the water itself. In the boats. The
building was crazy. Was a crazy enterprise, and it was, I don't know, 2 or 3 times more expensive than we planned because we didn't know how to get the stuff there. But now, and also the logistics for the operation are really complicated. It's a lot of people working around Tsimane. You cannot imagine how many. Not only in the jungle, but in the city and in the other city, in Trinidad and even in Buenos Aires. We have a lot of people working.
So let's talk specifically a little bit about the fishing for Dorado. All right. Tell me about the seasons of fishing in Bolivia.
The season is the dry season. It starts more or less in mid-April and finish in late October.
And you can fish throughout that entire time frame. Water conditions change, obviously, but that's your seasons of operation down there.
Yes. Normally we begin in June, in early June, because we want to be sure that all the fish are there, you not have environmental problems with the migration. So we start in early June and finish in late October. It's our winter, so it could be chilly because we are in the mountains. It's hot during the day and fresh at night, and the waters get clear for that. And it's just a few rains, not too much. That's what we want.
So if someone's going down to fish for Dorado, what gear are they taking, Marcelo, as far as rod weight, fly lines? Tell us a little bit about that.
We use 8-9 weight rods, fast rods, saltwater rods normally, and mostly floating lines, also for warm weather and saltwater. We have a couple of designs that we help to develop with scientific anglers that are specific for the jungle. Are prepared that lines are prepared to throw really big flies, because normally you throw really big streamers. That many people is not used to cast these big streamers.
Yeah, some of these are 7-8 inches long, heavy.
Yes. And also the leader is a straight fluorocarbon of 40 pounds, and we use a wire of 40 pounds, which is normally a camo color notable wire. It's a stretch of, 40 centimeters more or less of wire. And you can bring also some clear tip intermediate lines, just in case the river gets a little bit high. But normally we fish with floating lines the whole season.
Yeah, and in the past when I've gone down, that's your primary rod, is a 9-weight floating line.
Yeah.
And then another rod set up with maybe a 250 or 300 grain sink tip on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's always been effective for fishing some of the deeper water.
Sometimes, yes. In some conditions, you can fish with a sinking line. But normally what happens is that you walk a lot. You cannot bring, 3 rods in your hands, and you get your rod. And things happen suddenly in the jungle. You are walking, and then your Indian guide, we normally work with professional guides and Indian guides in all of our operations. That's a way to use their skills that are amazing. I will speak about that later. But normally you are walking upstream, and then your Indian guide or your guide point a fish, and you have seconds, You don't have time to change the fly, change the rod, whatever. You have seconds. Normally, what I bring is a rod with a popper and a rod with a streamer, and that's it. Just in case, because it's very interesting to cast a popper. If you have lots of feeding frenzies everywhere, you grab your popper rod, and it's much interesting,
So let's talk for a second about the flies. And a lot of streamers, some poppers, some big floating kind of foam flies, but most of them are large.
Yes.
That's what these fish are looking for.
Yes, because they kill large bait. That's the truth. You can use not as large. If you go more in the upper parts, in the headwaters parts, you can fish more with small flies. In the lower parts where the river is a little bit more murky, you need to use big flies and mostly black colors combined with red or purple.
And you guys have
yellow.
designed a number of patterns that are specific to your fishery. The Andino deceiver, some of the things like that.
No, we didn't design the Andino deceivers. The design of the Andino deceiver was made by an Argentine in the 70s.
Okay.
He fished in the Paraná area. But we used that. We adapted that fly for our rivers. But,
a lot of big streamers.
Yes.
So,
and also we use the fly we were using last year with big success was the Game Changer. It works fantastically. I mean, it can move a Dorado from a long distance.
Gotcha. So let me ask you this. Who should go to Bolivia to fish? What type of angler is a good fit for your fishery? And I know, obviously you own lodges, so your answer is, well, everybody should go.
Yeah.
Anyone can go, of course, but
I understand.
It is a demanding environment down there.
Yeah.
Who does well typically in Bolivia? What type of angler?
Well, I think the perfect angler for Bolivia would be a combination between a trout angler with a saltwater angler, or a trout angler with some saltwater skills, because the way you set the hook and you fight the fish is completely different from trout. But at the same time, the reading of the water and all that stuff is exactly like trout fishing. So I think that this is perhaps these skills could be the best. In terms of ages or physical preparation, well, most of our clients are adults. I would say, I don't want to say old people, but most of them are old people. Now, of course, they have more problems to walk super high. I mean, in the very headwaters, is more for a young, well-trained person, but they can fish very well anyway. It's not that hard as perhaps you can think. It is a little bit hard. You come back very tired at the end of the day, but
a lot of hiking, a lot of walking.
Oh yeah. But it's not. I mean, it's not very different than hiking and walking in a trout river.
Gotcha. So. Let's talk a little bit about river conditions that you see there. We talked about how, when it rains, obviously the rivers color up. They usually clear in a couple of days. Mm-hmm. But typically you can expect a combination of hopefully clear water with the sight casting opportunities we were talking about. And then, especially lower down, some of the off-colored, slightly murky situations where you're spending more time fishing structure and likely holding water than you are sight fishing. Not
always. We have perhaps 3 different types of sight fishing. The best sight fishing is when you spot a fish in a pocket, standing there, sitting there like a trout. It is very common in the very headwaters, and that's perhaps the most interesting way of fishing there. Then you cast upstream. It's a little bit tricky because you need to strip as soon as the fly touches the water. But in the murky areas, or in the more murky areas, you also can see wakes of the fish when they are in the shallows, or you can see a feeding frenzy, which is another kind of sight casting, but it's sight fishing also at the same time. So it's more common, this kind of feeding frenzies, for example, in the lower areas than in the headwaters. And so, I mean, it's a lot of different kinds of techniques and situations you will find along the week.
And we've obviously been talking a lot about the Dorado because that's the primary target when you go down there. But tell us a little bit about some of the other species that people can typically catch when they go down.
Well, there's the second species, which is amazing, is the pacu. The pacu is, we call it the jungle permit because it's very similar. The shape is similar to a permit. It's a round fish, black color, very intelligent, very smart, difficult to catch, super, super strong. I mean, when you catch one, you got pacu, you know what I'm talking about. It's super hard. I mean, it pulls and like a train, And normally, we catch them with fruit imitations. You have to cast high and imitate the drop of a fruit falling in the water because these fish are omnivorous. They eat fruits, leaves, small fish, many different stuff. Or we catch it with streamers too. Many times I caught them. I was walking upstream with my Dorado fly and I saw a pacu and I got it with a big streamer. They catch it. And the other fish is the yatorana. Yatorana is an amazing white fish. It's not as common as the pacu because it's also a Dorado target, When you catch a yatorana, there's a big possibility that a huge Dorado come and crush it. But it's super strong, and you catch it with smaller streamers and also sometimes with fruit imitations or small dry flies They catch it very well. They take very well small dry flies.
And the Yatarana are super strong for their size.
Pound by pound, probably is the stronger.
And all of these three species, which are the most common down there for anglers, are crazy. I mean, the Dorado and the Yatarana have these vicious teeth.
Yes.
It's incredibly sharp teeth. And then the Pacu is a wild species.
Molars.
Yeah. It's you take like your set of pliers and you kind of open his mouth up a little bit, and it has what looks like a set of human teeth.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Wild looking.
Yes, because they are designed to crush nuts and fruits and different kind of food. They eat almost everything. So, but it's interesting. I like a lot fish for Pacu because it's tricky, but also because the way you can see it. Because of the way you can see it, the fish is so black and so big. I mean, we catch Pacu up to 25 pounds. They're really big. I mean, in this clear water and shallow water, sometimes they go out from the pool and go to the rifles, and you look this big round black fish moving around. It's super. I mean, it's intense. It makes you tremble.
So you got Yatarana, you got the Pacu, and of course the Dorado, and you have these in all your operations. And now you started off with 2 lodge locations. Now you have 3.
Yeah.
Because about 3 years after opening the first ones, you opened up the Agua Negra Lodge in 2013, and you've got 3 different locations within the Tsimane.
In different tributaries, yes.
Different tributaries.
Yes.
That's right. Well, I'll tell you, people ask me about Bolivia and Golden Dorado a lot. And, they say, is it worth the trip? Or, is the Dorado really that cool to catch? And I'm pretty quick to tell people that these jungle Dorado are hands down one of the most amazing species in the world that can be caught on the fly. They're just an absolute one-of-a-kind type catch.
I agree.
And it happens to be in one of the most beautiful places in the world as well.
It is beautiful, really beautiful. The combination between the mountains and the jungle, it's something really unique.
That's right. And the Dorado, the way they hunt and the way they feed, I mean, they are really just the perfect predator.
Yeah. Yeah. I always say that they look like a T-Rex. The head is like a T-Rex head, small teeth, but a big mouth. I mean, it's amazing how they hunt and how they take the fly. I mean, it's a very special fish.
The perfect predator.
Yes, I think that's why it's getting more and more interest for the anglers internationally.
Well, the demand certainly keeps going up.
Yes.
It's getting harder to get into Tsimane these days. Everybody wants to go.
I know.
And you guys obviously control the number of rods and the areas down there. So it stays good. Now, obviously, we talked about this earlier. It's not the only place you find Dorado, but how is the Bolivia fishing different from other Dorado fisheries in northern Argentina? Tell us about that first.
Okay, well, the first thing in terms of environment is that you are fishing in a mountain river, shallow and clear, and in Argentina, normally you are fishing in a big river from a boat, and normally it's not clear. You don't do side casting there. You do side casting 50% of the time in Tsimane. That's the first thing. The other thing is that the Dorados are completely wild, and I believe that it's another species because of all this theory. But these Dorados, what I mean with wild, these Dorados are still feeding on the Sábalo like they did 10,000 years ago. In the Paraná system, the Dorados has been adapted to dams and bridges and commercial fishing, and the disappear of the Sábalo, because the Sábalo is object of commercial fishing in Argentina by tons and thousands of tons per year. So this fish has evolved with people, with civilization. The Bolivian Dorado is completely, it's just, we have just 5 villages of indigenous people with bows and arrows. Imagine that, it's completely wild. And at the same time, the other thing is that you are fishing in a national park. This is the only one operation. You will not see any people there, nobody. And if you fish in the Paraná, you will cross hundreds of boats per day. You are fishing in a completely open and public area. That's another big difference.
Well, I have to circle back and ask you a little bit more about the Tsimane. You were talking about their prowess as hunters and how good they are as hunters. And tell us a story about that.
Well, I always say that they have superpowers, because they have evolved also hunting in this kind of environment for thousands and thousands of years. So first they have their feet, they still have mobility in their toes, and they can grab the rocks when they walk. So we walk with our special felt sole boots and still slipper, in the river, and they go barefoot and run in the river, and never fall. So the other thing is that their senses are amazing. They can smell everything and hear everything, and the most important is the sight. The way they can spot a fish is something unbelievable. They don't use sunglasses, but they can spot a fish from 30 meters. They point there and say, Dorado, and there are Dorados there for sure. It's a funny story. Once I brought them the Costa lens.
Costa sunglasses.
Sunglasses, yes. And they love it because they love to use caps and lens and whatever, They love it. And they began to use it. But when they were fishing, when they were guiding, how do you say, they were pointing the Dorado, they do this. Dorado, and put it
lift
back.
The glasses off their head, spot the fish, then put them back on.
They put him back, yes, all the time.
Well,
because they couldn't see with the polarized glasses.
The other thing about the Tsimane, you talked about the bow and arrow. They don't miss anything, whether it's birds or monkeys or
whatever.
Big mammals. Yeah. They're also predators,
yes,
like the Dorado.
No, but the most I think the most impressive thing is how they hunt for fish, because the fish are not they are not standing there. No, they are moving all the time, and they catch 5 sábalos in 10 minutes or more.
With an arrow.
With an arrow, yes.
Well, that's pretty amazing, and as I said, it is truly one of the most unique fisheries I've ever had the great fortune to visit. It's amazing what you guys have set up down there.
Thank you.
Any more in Bolivia to explore? Any more to come, Marcelo?
Oh, yeah. We have a couple of new projects that we are working on. Some for Dorado, some for other species. Bolivia has this advantage that is not super developed, so that the indigenous territories and national parks in Bolivia are really wild, are still wild. Now, they have threats, of course, but they are very wild yet. So there are some areas we would like to open, if we have the chance. We are working on that. And fortunately, we will be offering new options for the anglers in the next future.
So more to come in Bolivia.
Oh, yeah.
Well, last question I have for you. We've seen a lot in the news lately about the political situation in Bolivia, and as it is with all news programs, they'll show the protests and lots of people in the street. You just had a change in your president. Evo Morales is out.
Mm-hmm.
You've got an interim president.
Yeah.
What's the reality down there, though? I mean, when you see news footage, you think, oh, boy, it must be dangerous. It's getting crazy. But you were there through all of this. What is the political situation?
It's not dangerous at all. Unfortunately, the news, as you said, the news always show the worst things, But it doesn't mean that it's happening all around the country. There are some people that support Evo Morales yet that are still protesting specifically in 2 parts of the country, in the high part of La Paz and in El Chapare, and that's it. But they are controlled nowadays. Even when the news shows just this stuff, in the big cities. I was in La Paz before coming here, and I haven't seen any single protest. Or I live in Santa Cruz, and I haven't seen anything. Everything is calm. What happened was that there was a huge, massive protest against Evo Morales after the elections, and it finished with the how do you say
Well, when the president left.
Yes, when the president left. Yes.
Yeah, he left for Mexico, and things calmed down pretty quickly.
And the new internal president is calling to elections in Jan. So Bolivia will have a new president very soon, elected normally. But I mean, things are very calm. I don't see what many people is asking me the same thing. I don't see what the news are showing in other countries.
Well, that's good to hear, and certainly doesn't affect you guys deep in the jungle on the Dorado rivers.
No, not only in the jungle. Santa Cruz also is very calm. Well, that's where the guests normally arrive, and nothing happens there.
Well, good news, and I appreciate you sitting down with us today, Marcelo. This is great. We didn't even talk about the other operations that you guys have in Brazil, throughout Brazil, and a new operation that you're getting ready to launch in Cuba. So we're gonna save that for different shows in the future. We'll do that.
Okay.
But we appreciate it.
It will be a pleasure.
Outstanding. Well, thanks for listening in on this episode of Waypoints. Thanks to Marcelo Pérez. We will talk with you again in the future.
Thank you, Jim.
Take care.
Take care.
This has been another episode of Waypoints, the podcast of fly fishing travel and adventure angling. Thank you for joining us, and be sure to visit yellowdogflyfishing.com for more trip updates, travel news, expert advice, and adventure profiles.